Hello, and welcome to Stride and Saunter, episode 224. I'm Kip Clark, and joining us today we have Leland Holcomb for a series I'm really excited about, an interview.
In a humble Wellesley household, Kip Clark works his craft in his homemade recording studio down in the basement.
If I had to describe all of the episodes, and someone were asking me, let's say on the street or at a party, I would tell them that the podcast is about dissecting humanity through curiosity and critical thought. So individual episodes aren't going to do all of that, but in a single episode I might talk about, to give some examples, the phrase "I love you," which I think is ripe for exploration and offers a lot of ideas. I think there are things that are too broad as a topic. I wouldn't talk about fashion in a single episode, that's a ton of things. I might talk about what it means to be a model in 21st century America, that's more specific. And so all of the episodes are critical discussions about what it means to be a human being, often from a questioning perspective rather than a declarative perspective. I don't claim to have all the answers. I would never want a guest who claims to know all the answers. It is about the art of discussing and working through an idea that excites me and keeps me coming back to it.
The podcast's origins start in Kip's college years when his friend Hector Marrero came up with the idea.
He said, "Hey, Kip, you and I have a really good conversational flow." And I was taken aback by that, a very atypical comment, but not a bad one. And I said, "Yeah, no, Hector, I agree, and I really like our conversational flow." And so immediately the next thing he says is, "When we get back to school, do you want to start a podcast?" And it was such an interesting moment in my life because it felt so fitting, and I was almost embarrassed that I hadn't come up with the idea myself before, because I feel very comfortable talking and have arguably too much to say.
This eventually proved useful once Hector left the podcast. Kip now does it all, including some things you wouldn't expect.
I've composed theme music for the podcast on an app on my phone. I do edit the podcast, but the content of the show, which is not the intro music for 15 seconds or the editing, are the conversations.
Conversations are just one of the reasons Kip keeps coming out with new episodes. Kip's goal is not to make you certain. In fact, it's the opposite of that. His topics aren't certain, which is another reason why he keeps doing the podcast.
I want people to feel comfortable with uncertainty. And to an extent where people feel certain about ideas, like why they do X or Y, I think there's room to challenge that and make them a little bit uncomfortable. I also think the podcast is a reminder that I don't want to become lethargic in my thinking or become sort of mindless in my actions. It's exhausting, and I think for some people it's even the definition of anxiety to constantly be thinking. But I think our brains are great tools, and I'd like to think I'm harnessing mine for, if not good, at least curiosity.
The craziest part is that Kip does it all for free, but that's exactly how he wants it.
If I were doing it for my job, I do wonder if that might drain my passion for it, because I'd be doing it for a paycheck. I'd be doing it because someone required it of me. And what I really love about the podcast at the end of the day is that good, bad, terrible, unlistenable, unpalatable, sharp, poorly compressed, muted, whatever you could say about the audio, the fact that I'm doing it because I want to is a really empowering feeling, and that's what I've gotten out of it. That's why I would encourage anyone with any access to any technology to pursue something creative in their life.
Well, that about wraps it up. If you want to hear more from him, his podcast is on Spotify, or you can look it up online. I'm Dylan Ford from NNTV.
And as always, we thank you very much for listening, and from thought to word and voice to ear, this is Kip Clark, signing off.